Hey there, what I see is people letting their businesses run their lives versus them leading their business to love their life. I see this in corporate jobs, and I see where we step into expectations that other people have of us that do not honor us and allow us to lead our own life. Welcome to this episode, and I'm glad you're here to listen.
From the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. And I love to have guests on like Lindsay in respect of most of my guests, all of my guests lead a lit up life. Like they lead the life they want to lead. Doesn't mean that there's not work that goes along with that. But I want to reintroduce you to Lindsay because Lindsay Gordon has been on my podcast in the past. And I'm going to use the sign behind her, which those of you that are listening can't see, but it says you are a deeply consistent human. And I said, you need to put PS and you're really awesome too. Because Lindsay is one of these people that I am consistently, like, I step back and I'm like, wow, like whether you set your mind to something, Lindsay, like this is a key piece for the listeners that I'm hoping that they get out of here. Like, how do I do this? You set your mind to something and you move mountains to make it happen. Like, and literally move to the mountains, right? She just recently moved to Vegas. And I'm going to let her introduce herself because some of the things that she has done to show up in the world has changed recently. And I'm going to let her share something exciting that just happened last night. But I want her to talk the heck out of what happened last night and what she did leading up to last night. So Lindsay, introduce yourself, tell us how you show up in the world, what you do, and then we're just going to get into a conversation about how you lead your lit up life and what you do when things aren't going so great and they're not lit up. What are some hacks that maybe you have to get back into that state of happiness, right? And joy. So introduce yourself away. Lindsay and I actually go way back too, because we have been in this international mastermind group now, in and out, right, over the last 3 years and have stayed in touch. And I'm so thankful for that and blessed for that. So introduce yourself and then we're going to get started.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me. And yes, it's always just such a pleasure to come and chat with you because I love you so much too. So I am Lindsay. I'm a career coach for analytically minded people. And I say that because I have a pretty unusual engineering degree. So I like to say that I bring my engineering mindset to this question of how do we know what job is going to be a good fit for us? How do we make decisions that we know we're going to be happy with? And how do we do that in the most practical and structured way? So the work that I'm doing now is I help senior leaders who have been in a company for many years and have reached this point of, have I been here too long? Is it time for me to move on? Maybe your friends are calling you a lifer. And what I help senior leaders do is to make the decision that is actually right for them. So instead of listening to the pressure and noise, we figure out, do you want to stick around? Is it time for you to leave? And help you make that decision with intention and clarity. So it's all about clear decision-making over here. And I am extra excited because I have my book out now called Right for You. And it is all about how do you actually figure out what is right for you in your career, make that decision so you are no longer waffling about should I, shouldn't I, do I want management, do I not, do I take this promotion, do I not, so that you can be decided in a way that feels good to you and move forward with not only your career, but also your life.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. And so by the time this drops in the next week or so, or 2 weeks from now, I will have already purchased my book and be reading it on the airplane home. And so I cannot wait to read it. But I want to step back because I think a big key piece of what you help people do and I want to just have a little conversation about this and what you observe and what I observe in this as we both work with clients around making the decision. It's like, dun, 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 right? Like, we got to make a decision. Oh my God, right? And then it's like, oh yeah, I have to make a decision. And all these voices start to go off in people's heads, including ours. We've been there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. So tell me what helped you get to that kind of target of, there's a lot of things that go into this, a lot of things that then go into after the decision is made, but really honing in on what is the decision? Like what prompted you, what made you make the decision to focus on making that decision?
Yeah. I had several people come to me and say, I have been in a holding pattern for years. And for one client in particular, and I mentioned her in the book, she was cleaning out her parents' house and discovered a journal of hers from 11 years prior. And she noticed that she was asking the exact same questions in that journal that she was coming to me with. And she was just like, I want to be done with this set of questions. I want to be decided, because I believe that when you are undecided about decisions, especially about your career, your life is on hold. And there's so much chaos and energy that goes into the waffling, the being on the fence, that it just became unacceptable for me to see people, struggling with this for whatever it is, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 11 years, And so as you said, I am all about like moving these mountains. I love speed. I like achieving things. And so when I see somebody who's been stuck for 10 years, it's just so painful for me to see the pain that they're experiencing.
Yeah, my heart was breaking as you were talking about that, because you're right. When we don't make a decision, our whole life is on hold. And that then led me to think that's where regret comes from.
Yeah, because you're just waiting. You're waiting and waiting and not making decisions and not taking action.
Yeah, it's like you're in the batter's box, right? Like for baseball fans, like you're in the batter's box, you're swinging, but there's no ball coming and you're not in the action. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That was a huge epiphany even for me, like talking about that. Right. And so I don't know about you, but I find too that when my clients, the biggest amount of turmoil, dissension, energy, like the biggest output and the opposite in the law of polarity of joy is like this chaos and like pain. And like, I find that so many of my clients, they don't see until they get to the point where they make the decision, like the energy that gets expended on the thinking about the decision.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your suggestions on how do you get unstuck from that?
It is completely exhausting to just constantly go back and forth. I had a client who had been in his company, I think for 17 years, and he was like on and off for the last probably 10 years. I have had my resignation letter ready to go. And just like, he never ended up using it, but just imagine that feeling of like, all right, is today the day, right? Like, am I going to be able to survive it through the day, or is this the day that I use this resignation letter that's sitting right here? So, God, it just takes so much of the time and energy. I think one of the things I like to start doing in this area of decision making is to identify the pressures that you feel around it, because that also is a huge part of the energy suck. So if we can acknowledge the pressures that you feel from family, the pressures that you feel from society, and it doesn't actually need to be individual humans, because I had a client, I think maybe like 2 weeks ago, who said she listed out all of the pressures, internal, external, all of the different pieces. And she said, it's so funny because I can't actually name one specific person that's telling me these things, but I have just picked up these messages of I should be further ahead by now. I have to make sure I'm constantly advancing, right? She just picks them up from the society that we're in and the news and whatever it was. So I think if we can just really notice like how many of those voices are just rattling around in our head and contributing to that chaos, that's one way that we can already kind of shift some of that feeling.
Yeah. And so then, Lindsay, how does, when you have I think about like your head when you're in this, and my listeners have heard me speak of the 4 people in your head, transactional analysis, but like I think about our heads as having like all these multiple voices in them. What's a hack, or I don't even like the word hack, but what's like a tool that you would say if you have all these voices going on in your head that you can help to hear your what feels like still small voice amongst all the chatter? Like, is there any way to help like find that voice that you recommend that's maybe even in the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole thing, right? And it's not easy. It's like,
So go buy the book. That's
yeah,
it.
I mean, that's why I titled it Right for You. It's like, how
Yeah.
do you listen to what is actually right for you? And it's difficult. And there are a lot of reasons why it's difficult. But I think number one is probably like getting them out on paper. A lot of people actually enjoy this process of let's just kind of bring them into the light of all of these voices that, you know, are kind of living rent free in there. So if you
Yeah.
can separate those, that's one way you can do it. And then the book takes you through this 4-step framework of figuring out what is actually right for you. And that goes through your values, that goes through what helps you feel fulfilled at work. It goes through your strengths, and then also the working conditions you need in order to thrive. And my philosophy is that the more you understand those pieces that actually work for you, the easier it is for you to dismiss all of the voices that aren't working for you and all of the choices that aren't going to be right for you, and to really just make these decisions with confidence. So I think the more we can strengthen that little voice and knowing what it wants us to do, then we can just make decisions that feel so awesome to us.
Yeah. And Lindsay, I was having a visual with so Lindsay does these characters, and on the front of the book are some doodles, and I was imagining these doodles, and maybe you have this in the book, but like in the headspace, like all these little people, right? All these little doodles, and then one like yellow one or red one that's you, right? Like, and it's all the same size as all the others. And then eventually those all become smaller and this one becomes bigger because you trust yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't find some mentors, or I call it a board of directors, to maybe give you other perspectives, but you make the decision. You don't have to, because you trust yourself, and you don't have to go ask 18 other people to affirm or disaffirm, because then you're not taking personal responsibility for your own decision. And I see that happen a lot.
Yeah.
And I was seeing those doodles in there because, and I want to go, okay, sorry, I'm like all over the place because I'm so excited about all of this stuff. But I want to also talk about the 4th one that you talked about, because I think people don't think about this enough. And even as business owners, we don't think, well, we should start to think about what are the types of conditions, AKA culture, that I want to create in my business that attracts A-game players that want to work in that situation. And so that whole like looking for conditions to go to work in, but also as someone that creates the culture of a business, that's a pretty important step there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love thinking about it in terms of our own businesses. That's super interesting to be like, no, we create it for ourselves too, and for
Absolutely.
our team. And it's probably related to, you know, the values that you want to have in your business and the ways that you want to work. So yeah, it can be, you know, day-to-day work. It can be the physical environment. It can be the people you surround yourself with. It can be the way that you structure your day. So there's so many parts that go into these working conditions. And again, the more you know about what actually works for you, because there's no right answer.
Right.
For some people, they're going to want, an office with lots of light. And for some people, my husband always jokes, he works in games and he works a lot with artists. And there's always this struggle of like, artists want it as dark as possible so that they can see the tablets that they're drawing on. And so it's just like, there's no right answer, but you need to be so clear about what enables you to do your best work.
Yeah, clarity. And I want to touch on that here in a second, but I've just thought of 2 other books for you. Tell me, and I'm like the idea person. Write for your business and write for your team. Right? Like building the value. How do you feel fulfilled as a team? What are your strengths as a team? And what are the conditions that you want to create? And the same thing for business owners. Okay, there, bam.
Book 2. All right, books 2 and 3 coming soon.
Okay. But that's what I love about you, Lindsay, because like all of these pieces of information that you've given and the advice you've given, it's transferable, right? It's not, because in this case, you're pinpointing on the individual, but it's really universal.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because what I wanted to do with this book is, yes, I want to support the individuals getting clear about what's right for them, but I've also written it for the manager and the leaders of the company to be able to say, look, it's a win-win situation when your employee is clear, because you get to have the best conversation you've had about where to fit that person in at your company. And if they're not the right fit for your company, you also want to know that to be able to get them into the right place. And so you can bring someone in that's going to be an awesome fit. So if you're a manager or a leader listening to this, I want you to think about this as a resource for your people so that everybody can be working at their best and figuring out the contribution they want to make at the company.
That's so awesome. And Lindsay, this is a great segue. I want to go back to clarity here in a minute, but a great segue. If someone wants your book, because I know with the launch, the virtual launch happening last night, that you've got some exciting news. So share that. And then I want to go back and talk about something else. Like, where can somebody pick up a book of yours?
Yes. So book is available on Amazon. Again, it is called Write for You. And if you go and purchase it today, the ebook is available for 99 cents. So get a copy and get some relief and get some clarity and get some confidence. And that will be available till I think 5 p.m. PDT tonight. So do not delay, get your copy today.
Yeah. And tonight, meaning the day this drops, which is the 6th of September. So yeah. And I'm so excited again. I can't wait to read it. So it's Write, RIGHT for you. Okay, so I want to go back. Thank you for being very clear and helping us understand where we can read more about this. I anticipate you're going to hit the bestseller list in no time, in all honesty. So when we think about all of this, one of the things that I'm hearing you talk about, and what I love, is the universal law of transmutational energy says basically everything is right now, there's nothing new under the sun, things just haven't taken substance, right? And what I love about this is one of the things that I really help my clients do is get really clear on what the desires are. And that's what I'm hearing for you too, is this clarity around what your values are, how you feel fulfilled in work. Like I say to people, I am a connector, I'm an inspirer, and I'm a teacher. If I'm doing one of those 3 things, I'm happy. If I'm doing all 3, I am lit up. And the work or the how I go about doing that doesn't matter as long as I'm doing that, which to me is the whole fulfillment piece and how I feel fulfillment. And then what are my strengths? Some would say too that those might be similar, but and so when I think about all of these things, it's really about getting really clear on what is right for you.
Yes. Yeah, everything is clarity. And the way that I describe it to clients is, if you have no idea what you want, there's absolutely no way you can communicate it to anyone else. So you can't communicate it in a job interview. You can't communicate it in a conversation to your manager. So we always have to work on your clarity first, which then translates to clarity in all of these other situations. So I also think that clarity is everything. And I feel kind of similarly as you. If I am learning, sharing, and inspiring people, that's pretty much what I've done across all of my different careers. I'm in my third so far. Who knows what's next? But that it's always been about that. And that also feels very clarifying and focusing for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, I want to like put on a time capsule and I want to go back. Like, where did you get this superpower of being able to fairly quickly? Now, when I say fairly quickly, I don't want it to sound like you rush into things, because I haven't seen you rush into things. Like you are logical. And so like you go through a process, and sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's, 5 days, sometimes it's 6 months, but you go through a process, but you do make decisions very quickly. And once you decide, you don't look back. Where did this superpower come from? That's a big question.
That's a big question. Gosh, I don't even know how to quite answer it, but I'll share the couple of things that are coming up. I have always had a sense that life is now. I honestly don't know where that came from, but I just have this really overwhelming sense that we get one life and there is so much to experience. Like, I feel like my curiosity is off the charts. And so I'm like, how do I get to experience as many lives as I can in this one life that I have? So that's something I feel like I've always had. I think the second piece is my brain thinks in frameworks. So I come from an engineering background. I find that I have so much chaos in my own mind until I have a framework. So there are so many areas of my life, like people laugh all the time. Like during the pandemic, 5 out of 6 of my best friends moved away from San Francisco, where I was living. And it was so hard for me. And I was like, I just don't know how to think about friendship. Like, how much of a problem is this? And so, of course, my brain was like, okay, well, I need a framework for this. So I literally read all about friendship and read the different ways that people think about friendship, and then made a framework for myself. And then I was like, oh, I actually don't need to be as stressed about this, because for me, friendship looks like XYZ. And so this is where I need to prioritize, and this is where I need to focus. And then I felt really calm. And same thing about moving here. It was really stressful to figure out where I wanted to be in life. And I was in indecision for like 2 years, which was really chaotic for me. And then I made a framework. I was like, all right, what are all the inputs that I want out of the place I'm living next? And then the framework and knowing what was right for me allowed me to make that decision quickly. And then it went really quickly. We bought a house and we moved like super quickly. So I think I notice when I am having that chaos and that energy drain of being undecided, I build a framework for myself and then basically have a story for myself as to why this is the right thing for me. And it's very calming for my brain when I do that.
Yeah, actually, I wrote that down because that's a really good piece of advice for anything.
Yeah.
Right. First of all, you had talked earlier about getting things down on paper. So like getting it down on paper, what your desires are, what your wants are, so that you can then be clear and have clarity about what those wants are, create a framework. So do some research, get the information, create a framework for yourself to then create the environment or the conditions for you to step in calm and knowing, right? Like knowing that this is the right place for you to be. And it helps keep the other voices
quieter.
Yes.
I'll add one thing too. I love how much storytelling plays into it, because ultimately humans are story creating machines. And there's some really fascinating resources about decision making. So there's an article in the Harvard Business Review called "Stop Worrying About Making the Right Decision." And then there's also a philosopher and professor, Ruth Chang, who talks about hard decisions, and they both talk about how storytelling plays in. But for me, I love playing the game of what is the story that this next decision is the right one for me? And kind of goes into the framework building. But I literally did that with this move to Las Vegas. I said to my husband, okay, let's write the version of events that says Las Vegas is absolutely the right place for us to move, because it felt kind of wild in the moment we were considering it. And so we wrote out the story and we were like, oh my gosh, it's going to be the best because it's going to be closer to my brother, and we are going to have access to epic nature, and we're going to live down the street from our friend who lives here. And we just wrote the whole story. And then we were like, oh no, that actually is a pretty good story. Interesting. And so, and we would tell it to other people, and they'd say, like, Vegas, that doesn't make any sense. That's so wild. Why would you want to live there? And then we would share the story of like, well, this is how we made the decision. And everyone was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. So in some ways, we can make up whatever story we want to help us know the thing that is right for us.
I think that's beautiful, because one of the things that also intrigues me about you is, although you have this like really strong left brain logic, you are also a creative. And so knowing too the storytelling and the creativeness that you use in cooking and baking, and the photo ops that you love to do, right? Like, and when I come to Vegas, we're going to do a photo op. So we have to think about the theme so that we can like create something. But, you know, and to me, that's one of the beautiful things that I've noticed in you, and that hopefully our listeners have heard throughout this, is that you don't just lay in one side of your brain. Like, you have very beautifully modeled how you can like integrate both sides of those brains. Like, there's so much out there about right brain and left brain, and, you know, and the separateness of that, but you've done such a great job of interweaving both sides of that, and it's been really beautiful to watch.
Thank you. I think it's always been that way. I did musical theater growing up, so I feel like there's so much like in the theater that I really enjoyed, but I also went to a math and science high school. I think we often get told in like a pretty reductive way that you are one or the other. Like, the number of people who say to me, oh my gosh, you're an engineer and you're also so personable and you're outgoing and you're whatever, all these things. I'm like, man, we really have been told that either you are the logical person or you are the creative person. And I think that is a shame for most, if not all of us, because we get to use both sides and have different interests. So yeah, I just love giving people permission to, just in the way that I am. I hope that I'm inspiring people of like, let's do all of it and don't get trapped in the you're an engineer, so you must be XYZ way.
Right. And I think too, Lindsay, it makes you very relevant and approachable for people maybe that have more of the creative side that want help with this too, right? Like, I know you coach, like, because you come from an engineering background, but to me, earlier I mentioned like the concepts that you coach on are universal. And so that makes you really relevant and personable regardless of the come to or the come from that someone is coming from. So
and I work with people all from all different fields, which is always fascinating. You know, people sometimes assume, oh, do you just work with engineers or people in tech? Like, I do work with those folks, and I work with literary editors and, you know, the director of design at a hat company. So yes, I am using a logical approach, and I really do think that my way of thinking is applicable to everyone.
Yeah, I would agree. And so, Lindsay, I could stay on with you forever, and but it's come that time. And so if someone does want to find out more, you had mentioned go to Amazon.com and order the book. It's 99 cents. The ebook is until 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And on the 6th. And if they want to reach out to you though, and maybe find out more about your coaching, where would you send them?
Yes, 2 places. So my website is alifeofoptions.com. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. And if you are there, I would love to connect with you. I share a lot about what it looks like to do what's right for you, about client stories, and I would absolutely love to connect there.
Fantastic. Lindsay, thank you so much. And for those of you that want to get in touch with me, please feel free to go out to www.leadyourlituplife. And I would love to have a conversation with you about clarity. And I promise that after the 30 minutes we spend together, you will be clearer than you were when you started. That is for sure. So with that, it's a wrap. Everybody have a fantastic day and go out and buy your book.
Thank you.